Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, and this is your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about sabotaging some states with respect to the regulated markets. We're going to talk about Canada briefly, but diving into California and Illinois. On the line with us to help us out is Dan Chemist with Good CBD Products.
I'm Roman Chronic. I'm in Rolling Hills, California, brother.
Well, that's good for the topic today, because we're going to talk about California in just a minute. But diving into this article from the International Business Times, they say that this time last year, the cannabis industry looked as if it would be practically unstoppable. Canada had just become the first industrialized country in the world to legalize recreational cannabis, and Wall Street was throwing out huge estimates on future industry growth. In fact, earlier this year, investment bank Stifel forecast $200 billion in annual global sales by the end of the upcoming decade. So one of the most front and center problems in Canada on the supply front has to do with the slow rollout of physical dispensaries in select provinces. For example, Ontario, a province with a population of 14.5 million, has a mere 24 open retail dispensaries at the moment. That's about one open dispensary for every 604,000 people in the province. By comparison, Oregon, which didn't sell limits on retail licensing, has an open dispensary for every 5,600 people.
We've been to most of them. Might have been to all of them.
Been to a lot. I mean, there's a ton. I think maybe Washington has a lot more. I haven't seen the spots in Oregon where they're literally sharing parking stalls. So I'm wondering if North Seattle is more congested than places in Oregon. Would you agree with that?
No, Medford is insane, brother. Medford is insane. At one point, I Googled a chunk of Medford, and I had 27 weed stores within 4 miles of me in any given direction. Okay?
Wow.
And, I finally had to turn off a lot of the notifications because my phone on specials day, my phone blows up because I'm like a member of everybody's loyalty program, right? I've bought weed, I've had the experience. And so, yeah, it's pretty funny.
Hamilton in Ontario, or excuse me, in Toronto had the most per capita. There were more than Starbucks. They had several on every single block for blocks and blocks. And this is a small kind of suburb of Toronto. And since the legalization, a lot of those have gone away. But I got to see that a couple years ago where they were everywhere. It was insane. It's pretty cool to see.
2015 in Washington, at the end of the, gray market medical time, when, again, you'd run up and down 99 and they were everywhere, stuff like that. That density, and then the challenge of differentiating your product when we're sharing parking stalls, it's like going to Local Roots and Cushco there on 99. That's freaky, right? You can park and literally walk over from one to the other.
Yeah, so people might be under the impression that the U.S. has observed issues in Canada, that they're learning from those early stage mistakes that are hampering the legal cannabis sales, but that's not the case. There's 2 states that are sabotaging their respective cannabis industries due to the slow rollouts of physical dispensaries, California being one of them. So it was expected that the crown jewel of the U.S. market would quickly generate more than $1 billion in annual tax revenue. However, last year, annual cannabis sales in California actually declined by $500 million from the previous year. You can attribute that to high tax rates, are definitely the problem, with one addition of excise tax and wholesale tax atop of the California's robust state and local tax. So the aggregate tax on legal cannabis can reach as much as 45%. Dan, I think we have like 37% here, which is outrageous. So I can't even imagine what that's going to do to the illicit market or the traditional legacy black market, whatever you want to call it.
And so far, I have a lot of work to do. I'm fresh in California. I'm 10 days in. Okay. So far, the 2 things I've seen that are recurrent are, in the stores, there is an open conversation about trying to battle the black market, and wow, there's a cannabis culture here. There's a cannabis culture where I'm from, Washington. There's cannabis culture certainly in Oregon. Oh my God, yes, no doubt. Okay, I think it's fair to say, you want to talk cannabis culture? Come here. This is funny, dude. And in turn, if everybody's growing their own, how do you combat, that challenge of a 40+% tax.
Yeah. In addition to that, not only are they dealing with high taxes, but they're also going to be dealing with a lot of few dispensaries opening up. So, Pax Labs is down there, Weed Maps is down there. They're all laying off, upwards of 50% of their workforce because of the quote, slow rollouts. I think MedMen is going to be affected by that too. So you're going to kind of see that they're going to be blaming the California market. So close to 80% of the state's jurisdictions have also banned it. So they have an ability in the different cities or whatever to ban, and they are going to. So it's going to be a serious issue if the suburbs or conservative parts of California don't want it. It's going to be few and far between.
Funny, it is a little bit of a patchwork. You're going down the road and you search for cannabis near me, and over here there's none near me. Right? You go a little further down the road and you search for cannabis near me, and blam, here there is cannabis. It's like Oregon, right? It's the whole thing of, gosh, why isn't there any cannabis near me?
There's 1.5 open dispensaries in California for every 100,000 residents. So it's definitely not like Oregon. Yeah, few and far between, I guess.
Yeah. Still, I have a bone to pick. The way the article frames it, sounds a little deliberative. I don't think it's deliberative. I don't think there's somebody sitting back pulling the strings going, laughing about, woohoo, I'm going to cause a slow rollout and truncate all of this. We'll go find out. Maybe there is, but I don't think so. I think it's more along the lines of, look, bureaucracy is a slow, silly beast. And, it's hurting a cat with some cat stuck to it.
It's definitely the same issue we've seen with every other state. Slow rollouts, inconsistencies with products and availability and everything. So it's an unfortunate situation, but it's typical. And so we're just going to kind of see this play out. I think the one point that I haven't mentioned that kind of makes California even more of a cluster right now is the fact that they want to have in Los Angeles County revoting for a lot of the assignments of 100 licenses. They don't like the way it went down, so they want to redo it. We haven't really seen that too much anywhere else. So that's going to even impact it even more and slow things down even more, potentially cause even more layoffs.
The density of population, the physical land mass, right? It's like a dang country. And then at a granular level, the really good stories that we're going to run across, running around, roaming and touching. You need to know. So our pal Carrie Accardi got us hooked up. So tomorrow I'm down at Lowell's Cannabis Cafe, where a bunch of the women of weed doing the basically a high-end product display, like the top 50 women of weed from High Times and all of this stuff, right? Are going to be at Lowell's, and we're going to hang out and get a chance to talk California cannabis, and I'm going to get some stuff for the show. And I'm so psyched because, again, there's so much to learn here.
Very cool. Shout out to 420 Media. Carrie, appreciate the hookup. Can't wait to see the report that you've got. One thing with California that I want to mention before we move on to Illinois is that a lot of these farmers had moved from cannabis to hemp and are going to be pulling 600,000 pounds of hemp out of the ground. That's going to affect markets like Illinois. Illinois actually pulled 18,000 acres offline. So that's probably going to help some Michigan or Northeast folks in that region to help with that supply glut that could be affected as a result of pulling 18,000 acres. Not the problem, or not the case with California, with 600,000 pounds expected to be pulled out of the ground for hemp, which is going to affect Oregon for sure, and may even impact all the way to Illinois.
The rolling hills of rolling hills. What I'm seeing with regards to landmass, I'm going to be rolling toward Fresno today. And of course, Fresno is like the ag center. And so the space, and then when you start looking at some of these other places that are just big flat surfaces for growing hemp, it's crazy, brother.
So Illinois is another state that might be sabotaging its people. I mentioned they pulled 18,000 acres offline in Illinois. Apparently in June, Illinois became the first state in history to legalize recreational cannabis entirely through the legislative process. I actually thought that happened before, but I'll trust the article, I guess. But Illinois is also restrictive in its approach to designing retail outlets. We've seen monopolies in Las Vegas. This article even uses the word, they're trying to deter monopolies and oligopolies, but it may actually incentivize the illicit market. So this is pretty crazy. I've talked to Tom Howard of Cannabis Legalization News. He's an Illinois cannabis business attorney, and talking about capping the number of retail locations by a single company at 10. That's literally twice as many as we can have in Washington, but the total number can only be 500 total, and only 185 by the end of next year. So maximum retailers there can be 110 retailers total by the end of next year. That's not a lot. There's 1.5 dispensaries for every 100,000 residents, a tenth of Oregon.
The gating and the rules and the idea that these systems are all created equal, they're not. And a lot of the people who write the rules somehow end up having some of those licenses, Chronic. It's amazing. You wouldn't think it would work that way, would you?
No, not at all. I mean, to cap it for an arbitrary number at 500 is insane, because the total that it can reach is 4 dispensaries for every 100,000 residents when they meet that 500 cap. And they're going to have, local cities and conservative areas that don't want it, restricting that even further. So you have slow rollouts, again, in Illinois that can hamper companies' expansions and ability to sell products, as well as investment is going to be on the sidelines waiting for that to happen. And in the meantime, the illicit market is still running, the way it always has been, business as usual.
I'd like to spend some time with somebody who's who models this stuff, because I'll bet you could predict failure on most of these models. I'll bet you could.
You only need 3 years to build a trend, right? And so we've been 5-6 years now in Washington. We have several states. So there's more than 3 states, more than 3 years. You can build trends and look at anomalies and figure out what's going to happen. As an analyst, it's easy for me to look at it. We talk about it a lot on the Talking Hedge about what's going to happen just based on our own experiences, because these things repeat themselves over and over. It's not just the Origin House in Illinois or the Cresco Labs in Illinois that are affected. It's the weed maps in California and the Curaleafs in California, every mom and pops in Washington, because we're not vertically integrated without the ability to have outside investment. This Petri dish experiment in Washington is really hard to look at, but gaining a lot of experience to the point where you mentioned offline going down to California, you kind of feel like a wizard with a crystal ball, being able to predict stuff, because it's just so repetitive seeing all these states come online.
Most of the time, the answers are classic business answers. They're almost axiomatic. I do feel like I'm from the future a little bit, and I do feel like I can help California and I can help partners and I can tell them what we've seen practically from Oregon and Washington, and we can speak to that recurrence and how you got to get out ahead, because we can tell you what's coming, and what's coming is distribution. What's coming is a refinement of product pricing and a competition level that is ridiculous. Whether it's the black market or the store that's just up the street or the store that shares the parking lot with you, right? The delivery service. There's so much opportunity in this market. Capturing that opportunity takes execution, and that's why I listen to the Talking Hedge, Chronic.
Next month, we're going to have a panel that's about 2020 predictions and also recapping 2019. So it's always kind of a fun little panel discussion to talk about what's going to happen in the industry. So definitely come back and listen to that episode. With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.